thing is, they're going to force you to defend the entire football field. And I think it really comes down to discipline. It comes down to pre-snap alignment and obviously then the ability to tackle in space. I think all those things are really important for this team.
You've said a gazillion times in the 7 years that I've known you, however long it's been, that you don't care about stats. Jirel didn't play in the second half. Was that looking forward, trying to get the other guys in, looking forward to keeping him healthy the rest of the year? What was kind of behind that?
Yeah, gosh, I don't even know if I knew that if he did or didn't play in the second half. I think the biggest thing for us is that backfield is one of those backfields that we're very confident in. And, I think Jirel is off to such a great start. Statistically, not statistically, I think we're just continuing to try to rotate guys, keep guys fresh, and continue to see who and what the best combinations that we can have on the football field as we continue to grow as a football team.
One more thing. Do you prepare any differently, because at least on paper, this could be a very defensive game. Do you prepare any differently if you're playing a team that's very defensive compared to a team that's possibly very offensive?
Yeah, I think every game, we've talked about this, Randy, forever, is just every game's got a certain flow. And sometimes you think you know what the flow of the game's going to be, and you try to, guess it the best way possible, and then you get in and you have to adapt. And so I think you're always preparing, all three phases of the game to kind of fit, number one, your personnel, and then number two, obviously what you're trying to face. So, I think, again, we've faced some really good defenses already this year and been in those games, and, you're facing an outstanding football team across the board right now. Certainly all three phases, they're a great football team. And so you give them credit where it's due and then get your guys ready to go play and try to put our guys in the best position to be successful.
You played over 30 guys, I think, on each side of the ball against Ohio. Number was pretty high in the opener as well. Out of that next batch of guys, who have you really been most impressed with, like revelations that maybe have earned a shot down the stretch here?
Yeah, I still think that there's a lot of guys that did a lot of great things, and it's probably hard for me to single, individuals out. I think when I look at it, I look at those guys that have earned those reps, and then who's playing really great for us on special teams. Miles Mendezun continues to do a great job for us. I think he's leading our team right now in special teams tackles, and again, played really good. Joey Peterson, I think, went into the football game, played really good. Hunter Zenzen went into the game and played really good. Deion Silas went into the game and played really good. A couple of those young quarterbacks went into the game and played really good. So, I think, for me, it's still an evolution of, who are you in practice? How do you continue to take advantage of the reps that you're given in games? And then what are you doing for us on special teams? And the more you can earn trust in our program, the more opportunity then we're going to try to give you to help our football team be successful down the road.
Why has this series with Baylor been as competitive and back and forth as it's been the last few years?
Yeah, I would have to imagine, they've been a really good team, and I think that's the one thing that they are. They're not just a good this or that. They're a good football team, and, they're going to challenge you in all three phases. They're going to try to beat you in all three phases, and they can beat you in all three phases. And so, I think we try to be that same version and try to be the best we can be in all three phases and put ourselves in the best position to be successful. But really well-coached team, a team that's really disciplined and really gives themselves a chance to win every time they go out and play.
I asked this to Manning a few weeks ago, but wanted to get your thoughts on Hunter. Is he a rarity in college football these days, a guy that not only waits 3 years to start, but waits 3 years before he even really had any hope of starting?
Boy, if we are in a rarity, that's too bad for our sport. It's one of those things where I think we grew up, and in my mind, I still think that's how the sport of college football is played. It's it's very hard to be a true freshman and be asked to carry the load of the entire team at any position. And, I think that's why you see in the National Football League, it's so few rookies are actually starting in the National Football League. There's usually a year or two grace period until they become that. And I think the jump is even bigger from high school to college. So if it is a rarity, I think that's foolish. I do think what Hunter did is took great opportunity of his time growing under Brock, growing in terms of, becoming a college quarterback, growing in a college scheme, the process of how to prepare to play. I think those things were a great benefit to him, and I think that's why you're seeing him get off to a really positive start so far, is because he didn't waste those opportunities. He used those opportunities to be prepared for the moment. So I think more than anything, maybe the rarity is how he used that time to benefit himself rather than, trying to get on the field or whatever that may be.
I guess the other rarity of him is just timing, and that he's a guy that is technically draft eligible after this year, but also has 3 years of eligibility beyond that. How do you look at his long-term projection and your roster management with such a unique situation like that?
Yeah, I probably don't. I don't even look at it. I think for us, we haven't even. We're just trying to continue to get him off to a great start and continue to, manage the day-to-day operation of his first year of being the starting quarterback. But I think again, it's the world we live in, and obviously, from a recruiting and development standpoint, we're always thinking 2 to 3 years ahead in our program.
After being able to watch the film, I'm just curious what you guys saw on the blocked extra point, and then what are you doing on some of those things to clear those up? Obviously, had the 2 blocks kicked against Iowa as well.
Yeah, I think it's really twofold in both of those. You got to remember there's 2 young pups in terms of the kickers and the punters, and so operationally we got to continue to be the best we can be in some of those situations. And then, from a protection standpoint, I think there's certainly they're not as clean as they could be either. So I actually think both of those situations are a combination of both. And it's like I said, I know when you have young players in some of those positions, you're kind of going to go through a little bit of growing pain and trying to get yourself to be your best here as we get down the stretch run. But both areas continuing to clean up, and I thought we made great strides in the punt game in terms of the protection piece of it.
Go back to day one, if you can, when you were here. What was the first reaction about the speed of the team you had then compared to, and then compare it to what it is today?
Yeah, I don't even think, I think the thing that was probably as much of comparing ourselves is what you saw in this conference. And Randy, you got to remember we're coming in where you're talking about, Baylor at its, it's such a great place. Oklahoma, it's such a great place. You look at those Kansas State teams and the receivers that they had, and I think that was obviously it was a great concern, and we had to learn the lessons the hard way that we probably weren't ready to run with some of those teams. You look at that first year and even how we lost games. It was a shootout that we couldn't continue to shoot out with some of those teams. So, I think speed and development of speed and recruiting speed within our program was critical, because I think in this conference, top to bottom, it doesn't matter if it's offense or defense, teams got the ability to run. And if you can't at least match that in ways, not to say we'll ever totally match that with all these teams, then I think it can be a real challenge to success your football program.
What stood out to you this week about this defense? Have you guys prepared differently or ahead of Baylor?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, again, defensively is, we've been down the road. We play a great defense in practice, throughout fall camp. We've obviously played some tremendous defense already this year, and I think all those things that have helped us, in terms of getting ready for Big 12 season. And now you see another just tremendously coached defense and a really great defense. So I think all the things that we can learn is from how have we grown internally? What do we do well? What are some of the areas we need to continue to grow and develop? And then how do you just continue to pound away at yourself, knowing that the challenges continue to rise?
You always talk about growth and how important that is to your program. I know there's a long way to go yet, but even in just these first 3 games, how would you kind of characterize the growth that you've seen with a team that obviously coming in had a little bit less experience than you've encountered in the past?
Yeah, I think that's probably why the growth that I have seen has probably been astronomical in a lot of ways of what I've seen since even where we were at the end of spring practice to where we are today. And I think a lot of that is some of the inexperience. A lot of that is the youth. I think when you are young, the growth pattern probably has the ability to accelerate and probably go, with a lot more ebb and flow than when, you're an older team. And so I think this young team has really had the willingness and humility to grow. So I think you have to have that as well, and probably the right veteran leaderships to guide the growth pattern the way it's been able to grow so far. And again, I think all those things are going to be tested again this week. I think we'll have another measuring stick of how far have we grown and where are we really. But, again, I really like the humility and how this group has attacked growth so far. And they'll need to continue to do that, and we'll all need to continue to do that to continue to move forward.
Excuse me. How critical have your linebackers been in forcing turnovers, given Orion 2 forced fumbles, Gary 1, Reeder the 2 interceptions down the line?
Yeah, that group has really been, probably the wrong words of saying a pleasant surprise, but I think that, by the time we left spring practice, we were really nervous about maybe where that linebacker group was going to be when you were talking about December last year. You didn't know if you didn't know if Orion was coming back. You knew Gary was going to be back. You certainly didn't have Reeder. And then, man, you didn't know Miles. Will McLaughlin was a freshman. We didn't even know what he was going to be or not going to be. And then, all of a sudden, man, you got through spring and you're like, ooh, man, we may have a chance to be pretty special at this linebacker position. And again, a lot of credit to Coach Veit, a lot of credit to Coach Haycock, but I really, really think that group is from the end of spring on, man, there's just a really special vibe about that group and the depth. Karsten Marshall's playing really good. There's a lot of guys playing good football in that unit right now, and those top guys are playing the best football, and that's exciting for us.
And the obligatory ask about Remsburg, Cartevius.
Yeah.
I know Darren Wilson got banged up. Dimitri, any
Yeah.
updates on those guys?
Yeah, Darren Wilson won't be available this week. I would hopefully next week he'll be ready to go. Dimitri Stanley will be back. He was sick last week, so that's why he did not play on Saturday. And then I think Cartevius. My expectation is both of those guys will be available. Both guys again. I think Jake dressed out. We almost had him ready to rock and roll. Just didn't think he was ready to go, and Cartevius was really in the same boat. So I think today practice will tell us a lot, but I have high expectations. Both those guys will be ready to play for us.
Just add Bo to that list.
Yeah, and Bo will be ready to play.
This is kind of off topic from Saturday's game, but it came out this morning that, and I know you're someone who appreciates the tradition and pageantry of college football. It came out this morning that once Oklahoma goes to the SEC, they won't continue the Bedlam game against Oklahoma State. I'm just curious, the trajectory of college football, do you feel like the sport is losing something by losing some of these traditional rivalries that we've gotten used to over 100 years?
Yeah, Jared, we're just in such a unique time. There's a traditionalist about me that loves the tradition of our sport and the rivalries, those rivalry games, those experiences. And you see so much of that, even as it's come back a little bit. I think some of those teams that have played, I think Kansas State played Missouri 2 weeks ago, and, the excitement that surrounded that game within the conference. And, Texas and Texas A&M, there's so much of that out there. And so it'll be really interesting to see where our sport goes. I think we're very, and I think it's hard to make it's hard to make man, I'm going to stand on the table and make this statement because I still don't think we have any idea where this is all heading. I think we got to let the kind of next couple of years kind of see where it goes, let it all settle itself out, and then make a decision where are we in our sport. But I think it's a time of change, and any time it changes, I think you got to give it a little bit of time to see where we're really at, and then make the best decision on where are we and is it the best thing for the future of our sport.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you.